Hello world, it's Siraj, and I built an app called Tax Saver that uses GPT-3 to save you money on taxes. Let me show you a demo right now. The first step is for us to log into this app, and once we log into this app, you can build this app too, by the way, that's the point of this video. Do it! Once we log into this app, it's going to sign us in using Firebase, which is a database in the web. I'll tell you all about it. And then it's going to tell us how many tax breaks that it's going to find in our transaction history. How is it going to know what tax breaks it can find in our transaction history? Well, we use a service called Plaid that connects to almost any bank account in the world. And crypto coming up later in a different video. And we're going to connect to a specific bank account, and I'm going to use dummy credentials to log into this Chase bank account, which Plaid allows us to do. And it's going to log in, there's my balance, and it's going to connect to that bank account. And once it's connected, it's going to be successful. And then I can see a report using GPT-3 of all of the categories of tax deductible savings that I could have. And the way it does this is it uses the document classification API to read in all the JSON of all the transaction history that we're pulling from your bank account. And then it uses GPT to summarize that and then complete the text saying, here are the categories of transactions. And then it needs to match that up with known tax deductible categories for whatever type of business you have. Now that's a lot, but in this video, I want to show you how I made this app and I want to have you do it too. Okay. So this app is a test app. So it uses test data, dummy data, but it can be switched using the real API keys for real data, and that's up to you. But I want to get you started, and that's the point of this video. I built this in like 3 days, and you can too. I'm not a Flutter expert, but that's the first part of this. So what are the steps in this tutorial? First, we're going to design the app with ChatGPT, our co-founder. Then we're going to set up our landing page, and then we're going to build this MVP together. First step, let's go to ChatGPT. I've already asked it, how do I build this app? ChatGPT is really good at telling us how to build an app. So we say we want a Flutter app and we want to pull transaction data from Plaid and we want to use OpenAI's GPT-3 somehow and give us 5 steps on how to do this. And it does that. It's like set up your Flutter project, integrate Plaid, integrate Firebase, use GPT-3, and then determine tax deductibility by training a model on a data set of tax deductible transactions. And that's a fine-tuning layer that we can do later on. As a user, we're just going to interface with one single mobile application, and that's Flutter. And Flutter is a way to build both iOS and Android apps with one code base. Very cool stuff made by Google. And it uses a programming language called Dart that I am not an expert in, but I love programming in, and you can too. Okay, so a user goes to their Flutter app and that's called Tax Saver. And what the Flutter app is going to do is it's going to say, log in user, or sign up user, and it's going to use Firebase to do that. Firebase is a Google Cloud service that runs on top of Google GCP, and it allows you to have a database, user login, user sign up, all in one, and analytics. We're going to use Firebase for our database. And once a user logs in with Firebase, then it's going to ask them for their transaction history, and Plaid is the way to do that. Plaid is a service that connects to many bank accounts across the world and then securely pulls any type of data that you need. And they're that third-party authorization escrow-like service, that trusted third party for us. Once we have that transaction history, then we're going to use that as a parameter as we post that request to the OpenAI API, and it's going to return back to us all the strings of what the categories of those transactions are, and then we can cross-check those against a tax-deductible database, and then from those generate a report for the user that says, hey, here are your transactions, here are the ones that are likely tax-deductible, and you could save up to $2,000 if you were to deduct these on your next 1099 or whatever form you have in whatever country. Okay, so that's the idea of the app. And how do I know that this thing even works? Well, there's already an app that does this. It's called Keeper. They use GPT-3 to do this. Very similar app. This is probably dedicated towards a B2B company, but we can do this for, students, or we can do this for, different types of people. So that's that. And so once we know what we want to build, a tax-saving app using GPT-3, we're going to generate our landing page in one click using Durable. Durable lets us do this in one click. We're going to do that together. It's going to ask us what our location is and then some initial data, and it's going to generate a type of business for us in one single click. What's the name of our business? Tax Saver. And once we're done with that, it's going to pick a color palette and a bunch of text is going to be generated from that. And we have our one-click landing page. From our one-click landing page, we can collect signups, and then we can share that with our friends on social media or our WhatsApp group, whatever we have, people who like us and want to try out our app. And that's a way to get initial users. So there's our one-click app, very cool. And by the way, if you want a big directory of every single AI tool ever, here it is. Link is going to be in the video description for you. It's called Futurepedia. I love it for marketing, for copy, everything. In fact, I found Durable on this website. So imagine what else you could find if you go to this website. I'm always hitting you with the good links. That's what I'm here for. And since you made it to the end, no wrap yet. All right, so let's get to step 1 of our app, building a Flutter application. I'm gonna do this with you together. So Flutter has a really great installation page, and we just need to go through steps 1 through 3. And depending on your operating system, there's gonna be a different type of installation. I'm gonna go with Mac because I'm Mac, but it's very similar depending on what operating system you have. The first step for us is to download the SDK. I'm gonna download an SDK. It's gonna be a pre-built binary, likely, whatever version of software you're on. Once it's downloaded, we can unzip it to the same directory, and then we're going to add that Flutter tool to our path variable. Okay, so now we've exported. Now we're ready to use the Flutter commands. Let's see if we have that. Flutter. Okay, so now we're able to use the Flutter commands. Great first step. So now we're here, and now we're going to run Flutter Doctor. What Flutter Doctor does is it allows us to check our system if we have all the dependencies necessary to run Flutter. The dependencies necessary to run Flutter are 2 different operating system environments, or sorry, IDEs. The first one is iOS, and the second one is Android Studio. So you need Xcode, that's to build on iOS, and the next one is Android Studio to build for Android apps. Go to both of these, Android Studio, go to Xcode and download those. You need those in order to develop with Flutter. And then Chrome, you don't necessarily need Chrome. We just want to develop for iOS and Android, that's it. So that's all you need, and right now I have both of those apps on my system. So Flutter Doctor is like, you're good to go. You can move on to the next step. The next step is to set up an editor. And my editor of choice now is VS Code. And I choose VS Code because VS Code is amazing. It has GitHub Copilot integrated in it. So I have a lot of, different suggestions that are given to me from it. I love it. So here's VS Code. And we need to install Flutter and the Dart plugins. So I'm going to go to View, Command Palette, and then once there I can go to Install, Extensions, and then Dart. Dart is the plugin, so I've already downloaded it here, but we just click on that and that downloads it. Okay, so then we go for a test drive. Let's create a brand new Flutter application together just to see if it all works. So we're going to go to View, Command Palette, Flutter, New Project, select Application, hit Enter, and then a main.dart file is going to appear. And then we can run the app by locating in the status bar what's the simulator version, and then it's going to run there. So we're going to go to View, Command Palette, Flutter, New Project, Application. I'm going to put this in a new directory. New folder, demo. Okay, I'm going to put it in there. Flutter application 1. Okay, it's going to create that application. Boom, here's our main.dart file, empty template right here for us to use. So now if we want to run it, we can hit F5 to start running it. Or we can open up the terminal from here. Make sure Flutter's in our path. So we're going to hit Flutter Run, and Flutter Run is going to run this application on the simulator that we specified. I chose an iOS simulator, but we could choose an Android simulator if we wanted to. And underneath the hood, this Dart programming language is being compiled down to native Swift code on iOS and native Java code for Android. Very cool stuff. Flutter has come a long way, and we can see we got our first Flutter app running. It's responsive. We can hit the button, and there's an event listener that says every time you hit the button, this text field is going to update. And the way it updates is by this $sign flag in this counter variable. and it's activated whenever a widget is gestured. It's very cool stuff. We can learn all about Flutter here, write your first app, but we don't have time for that. We want to get right to building tax saver, so we know how Flutter works kind of now, and now let's go to the next step, and the next step for this is going to be to download a login template for Flutter. It's called Flutter Login right here, Flutter Login, and here's what it does. It's got this nice animation. It's got a sign up form, email. And believe me, this stuff takes time to build. I tried. I didn't have time. So we're just going to start off with this, and then we're going to integrate everything else. So let's go here, and we're going to download this as a starting point. Now remember, we have all the Flutter tools in our operating system now, so we don't have to do anything much. I'm going to show you how to run any Flutter app you find very easily. So we've downloaded it right here. And it's going to be a zip file from GitHub. GitHub is where we download code from, all code, almost everything. Okay, we've opened it in VS Code. We're in the example directory. We're going to run flutter pub get to download all of our dependencies for this application, and then we're going to run flutter run. That's it. Download our app, get our dependencies, and then flutter run to run the app. Flutter pub get to download dependencies, flutter run to run the application. It's running it right now. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so we have our demo app here. We can, look at it and see what we want to do here. What's it called? It's called You Are Trying to Explain on Example.com. On the dashboard screen. So now we're on the dashboard screen. Let's look at the dashboard screen right here. So it's got this eCorp image, which we don't really need that. So we're just going to remove that. Let's first add ourselves as a user to this app. So we're going to say, here's our username, hello@sirajraval.com. And then I'll just name some random password, 12345. And that's going to go in users.dart. Then we'll go back to this screen. We'll reload it with the R button. That's all we have to do. Hot reload, very fast. Go back to the simulator. And then we'll type in that credential. And it worked. Okay, so now we have this default screen. And what we want to do is we want to see where some of these buttons are. So there's a fund transfer button. So just real quick. So in Flutter, there are widgets, and widgets are defined as screen elements, on-screen UI elements. And there's so many different types of widgets in Flutter, right? These are the two basic class files from which almost everything in Flutter is built off of: foundation and materials. There's also widgets, and there's different types of widgets. There are table widgets, there's this widgets, there's too much to explain. So let's just get right to building the type of widget that we need, which is a Plaid integration. Whenever we go to Plaid integration, what we want to do is we want to create an event listener that whenever this button is clicked, we integrate Plaid. There are bank accounts all across the world that we might want to connect to get users' transaction history or to charge them as well. We don't necessarily need to use Stripe. We can just use Plaid, get a little fee whenever we pull from their transaction history, and then generate an AI tax deductible report for them, right? Even if we charge them like $100 a month, but we save them $1,000 a month, that would make it worth it, right? So we can decide how to do that later. But right now, let's go to the quick start. And we can see that there's some key concepts that we need here. Just like every other service, we have an API key and a secret, and that's our access to this app. And so what you have to do is you have to sign up for Plaid. And once you sign up for Plaid, it's going to give you API keys. And we can use these API keys to integrate into Flutter. But the best thing about Flutter is we don't have to integrate Plaid in some weird way. We can integrate it using a tool called a Flutter package. Node has NPM. Okay, that's a package manager, Node package manager. Flutter has pub, and this is the directory of all Flutter packages. So let's just see if there's a Plaid package here. So let's search Plaid, and there is a Plaid package right there. Plaid Flutter native, perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to install this package, and the way to do that is to just add this to our pubspec.yaml file, Plaid Flutter, and then we'll run Flutter pub get, and it'll download that and integrate it. So let's do that. Let's go to our Visual Studio Code. We'll go to our pubspec.yaml. Under dependencies, we're going to type Plaid Flutter in, and then we're going to hit reload, Flutter pub get. Okay, so now we have Plaid Flutter integrated into our repository. And to use it, we're going to go to an example. Here's a beautiful example for us. So it's saying that it's going to create a bunch of event listeners, and it's going to say like, create this Plaid link object. And once you have link, which is a pre-built interface to access all, at the beginning you saw that Plaid, that's link. Link is a pre-built interface to access Plaid. It's kind of like, it looks like it's inside of your app, but it's actually off your app. It's on their server, but it looks really nice, and you don't have to do anything to integrate that. So other than just enter the code to integrate it, you don't have to design it or customize it or have to deal with all the privacy security issues that they do. That's what they do. That's how they make money. So we want to create a token that's going to allow us to access the Plaid API. So here's how we do that. We're just going to copy this and paste it into our app. We're also going to add the single line to the top, Plaid Flutter, just to make sure that it's receiving this. So once we go to that button that we talked about earlier, the Plaid button, we can insert a gesture detector into there that's going to detect whenever it's tapped. So that's how we get that event listener. And once it's tapped, that button right there, once it's tapped, it's going to launch Plaid Link. And Plaid Link is that interface I talked to you about. It's going to launch it using a token that we generate, a sandbox token. I actually generated it from command line right here, but you can generate it different ways. I'm going to get that token, and then I'm going to paste it in here, and then it's going to connect to Plaid. Perfect. And it's going to connect to Plaid via this test account because it's on a sandbox mode, but later on we can change it so it's going to connect to real bank data. And it's going to return that as a JSON file that we then have to use GPT-3 to parse. So now that we have Plaid integrated in this test framework, let's integrate GPT-3. So if we go to pub.dev, we can see and search GPT, we can see that there's so many GPT-3 APIs. There's even this one that was just made 3 days ago by this crazy mofo for ChatGPT, which I'm pretty sure there's still not a public API. So that might be illegal, but kudos to you for being very, very ballsy. Good job. Let's go to the legal ones, which are here. Sounds like exactly what we need. So there are 3 steps here. We just have to add this to our dependencies, import the Dart code, and boom, create that GPT-3 object. From there, we can pull all those requests as asynchronous await functions in Dart, very similar to promises in JavaScript. And once it's got our API key, it's going to pull back the response that GPT gives us. So which of the GPT APIs do we want to use? What we want to do is we want to use the text completion API to start. And what our prompt is going to be is the document of all of that JSON transaction history with the Uber ride and then the amount, and then Airbnb and then the amount, and whatever expenses in the amount. And we want to categorize all those expenses into transportation, into travel, into utilities, home office expenses, things that are tax deductible. But it's not going to know that they're tax deductible. It's just going to know how to categorize them. And there's a lot of transactions, right? So that's the point of GPT-3. Then later on, we can cross-reference against a tax database. So we're going to use the completion API to do this. We can see the post requests here. It's going to need the key and then the prompt, the tokens, the temperature. We're going to set the tokens to 20 so we get back a lot. So let's go back to Flutter and integrate that. Make sure that we have an API key, by signing up. Then we're going to go to the GPT-3 API for Flutter. We're going to install those dependencies by adding them to the pubspec.yaml file is going to be here. And that's going to be there. We have our dependencies there. Okay. And then we're going to add that to the top of our Dart code. Okay, it's there. And then we're going to use the API by getting our key. And this is what I got so far. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect to the API, ask it what are the top spending categories that usually get tax refunds. Then I'm going to modify this. So instead of giving me just a single response back, it's going to give me those categories, and then I have to add them to user interface, which I showed you earlier, which looks like that. So it's gonna take those categories, it's going to put those on the screen, as many as there are, and it's going to show all of my savings like Uber, Airbnb, supplies as a freelancer or home office worker. All those things are tax deductible in the United States. And this is dependent on whichever country you are in, India, Brazil, Germany, all these countries. I know you're out there too. And I know that not everybody has access to Plaid or to Stripe. And I know that crypto is the way to get everybody on board. And I will continue to do more tutorials like this that gets everybody paid, all right? So that's the GPT-3. And there's one more thing I want to show you, which is Firebase, right? So we logged in with our user, but it was on a text file. We want to put it on an actual database, right? So let's go to Firebase. And Firebase is how we do that. Firebase was essentially made for Flutter. Both of them are by Google. So they really work together very well. And what we can do on Firebase is we can create a database for our users. Let's create a new project. This project is going to be called Tax Saver. And once I have my project, it's going to create that with an analytics account for us. And it's going to create that. Once we have our account, it's going to give us an API where whenever we are a new user and we have a username, password, whatever, we send that as a request to Firebase or as a post request to Firebase. Firebase will create that user in their MySQL database for us and then return a response saying, hey, this is authenticated. So we don't have to do that locally. And most importantly, there's no text file that we're using for this stuff. Users can have their project be secure. So we created our app on Firebase and it's like, well, what platform do you want to use? Well, we want to use Flutter. So it's like install the SDK. We've done all that. Install and run Flutter Fire. Let's do that in our terminal. So we're going to run Flutter Fire. So we're going to run Flutter Fire and then we've done that. And now we're going to run that command and that's going to automatically integrate our app with all of Firebase projects that we have. Any Firebase code that we need, it's just going to automatically, it's going to say, what platform should we go for? I'm like, just do them all. Android, iOS, web, everything. And once it has registered as a Firebase application, we have successfully integrated Firebase into our application. There's still more to do. This is going to take a while. And after all of that, we import two of these files, Firebase core and Firebase options, and then we can initialize our app. And then from there, we can use the SDK to sign up users, etc. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Boom, now we have our Firebase app IDs for all platforms that we want to deploy to. It's connected, our app is right here, and the code is going to be in the video description. Go check it out. What are the next steps here? Well, we want data persistence. Do we want to store those transactions on the device, on the cloud with Firebase, or not at all? Right now they're on the device, but we integrated Firebase so they could be integrated in the cloud. We might want to generate a 1099 or some other fully baked tax report or something for the user instead of just giving them a table view. And all that comes down to a better user interface. Now, there are other things I didn't talk about that much in this video, like marketing strategies, etc., and how to grow. I will do that next week. I'm doing this every week. I'm just building apps, putting them out there for you guys to use and build and make money wherever you are in the world. I think that's the most impactful thing I can do for you guys, and I'm having the time of my life doing it. Thanks for being here, and since you made it to the end, I'm gonna wrap. I'm trying to code in Flutter, baby. It's so much like butter. I'm not trying to stutter. I'm kind of trying to mutter with my GPT-3 prompt editor. Yeah, anyway, thanks for coming and happy learning.